one of the tips that I would give to any graduate student or any student who is looking to begin building their career is to have a sense of openness. I think you have to understand that the roles that we might traditionally think that we want to get into, there's nothing wrong with that, but we need to be open to other experiences that could better be aligned to your skill set.
All right. Hello, folks, and welcome to the latest live edition of the Next Step podcast. I'm Jeff Kozlowski. I'm a senior marketing strategist here at the School of Medicine and Dentistry, supporting our graduate education and postdoc affairs group. We will bring in our guests in just a minute. Excited to celebrate International Education Week with two incredible alumni who began their journeys here at the University of Rochester as international students. Cindi Lewis, who now serves as executive support to the Director General at the World Health Organization, and Vivek Nanda, an assistant professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, leading groundbreaking cardiovascular research. They're going to join me to share their stories, explore their career paths, impacted their time at Rochester, and maybe how their international experiences shaped their success. We do have Cindi with us. Vivek did mention he's going to be a little bit late, but we're just going to bring him in on the fly when he joins. But Cindi, thank you so much for joining. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Greetings from, it's not so cold, I suppose, in Switzerland, but greetings from Geneva, Switzerland.
Yes, thank you so much. I guess, yeah, good afternoon to you. And we also, I just saw Vivek joined the conversation.
Hello.
Vivek, thank you for jumping on. We are live, so we're bringing you in on the fly here.
Great. All right. Sorry I'm a little late, but happy to be here.
No worries. You're just in time for the introductions. But Cindi, why don't we go ahead and start with you? I know it's probably, we could spend a whole episode on both of your roles and what it entails, but could you just give us kind of a brief introduction, Cindi, to kind of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So Cindi Lewis, originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and I graduated from the U of R, I think in 2014, but I finished my graduate studies just the year before. And at that time, my focus was very much in informed consent and working with vulnerable communities, particularly within the context of HIV prevention. And from there, I went into public health sector reform within the state of New York. And that sort of formulated, I think, the base for me to be quite curious about how we really bring people into the center of health. So a lot of the projects I was doing at that time was in the realm of cultural competency and also patient engagement. And I think we realized that across New York, there's tons and tons of diversity, and you have to be very, very creative, work with the providers, but work obviously with the patients themselves about how better to improve their care. And I think that really set the foundation for my work for a number of years. And certainly, I think it opened the door to my interest in global health. So I followed that trail into working in management consulting. And at that time, I got some exposure to different UN firms, but also other multilateral organizations that were providing health in one space or the other. And very shortly thereafter, I came into the World Health Organization, and it's been quite a journey. I started off in our governing bodies department, working with a number of our member states. We have 194 member states, and understanding how that works and how they decide on health policies is quite important. And I transitioned into our COVID response. So during the height of the pandemic, I think it was really, really fascinating to see how so many stakeholders were coming together, working across different governments and sectors. And that really laid I would say, the benchmark for me to get into the Director General's office. And I've been here in his office for maybe a little over 3 years. And my role is to provide executive management support. And what that really means is facilitating his engagement so that when he goes into any meeting, whether it's with a head of state or a private sector entity or philanthropic organization, that he's well prepared. I prepare strategic briefs, and I have conversations with a lot of our colleagues across the globe and think really about what we want to get out of these engagements so that we are pushing forward on the mission of the organization. So it's quite exciting. I learn a lot. I work with a lot of different people, and I travel also for my job. So that's a little bit of a journey of then to now and what I do now.
Yeah. So, and I noticed, and I'll plug your LinkedIn profile because I saw when you kind of a month or so ago when you were celebrating your 3-year anniversary, I guess, in the Director General's office. There's a great post on Cindy's page about her lessons she's learned in 3 years, being there, lessons in leadership. I recommend folks go check that out. But I'm sure you've learned a ton in that time. But and we'll talk more about that. But Vivek, I want to bring you in and just kind of have you. As you join us all the way from Alabama. We've got Switzerland today and all the way from the great state of Alabama joining us. Can you just talk a little bit about your current role down there at University of Alabama at Birmingham?
Sure. So I'm an assistant professor here in the Department of Pathology at University of Alabama, Birmingham, UAB. So I started off as a graduate student from UFR, and I think I was in the same boat as Cindy. I finished my studies in 2013, but the official graduation was in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a postdoc at Stanford University, where I was looking at the role of smooth muscle cells in the context of cardiovascular disease. So basically atherosclerosis, aneurysms, and peripheral artery disease. And that was kind of a translational project. So that got me really interested and wanted me to go further, and that laid the foundation for my independent studies as an independent researcher. And then I think I got a grant, and then I got recruited here to UAB as an assistant professor. So I joined UAB in 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic. So the starting wasn't great. We had to shut down our engines as soon as we took off, but then we fired up again, and I think it's going good so far. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to just ask quickly then, Vivek, we'll start with you. What led to your decision to choose University of Rochester for your graduate studies? What sort of attracted you about the atmosphere here?
Okay. So I actually did my undergrad right around the corner at RIT, so Rochester Institute of Technology. So after graduating, my batchmates, my fellow classmates, a few of them stayed in Rochester, and they actually did research at University of Rochester, and I went to Boston, but we were still in touch with each other, and I got to know what kind of research they were doing, and it really was interesting. And my second reason to come back was that I liked Rochester. I was familiar with the place, and being an international student, I wanted to be in a place that I was familiar. And also, I had applied to other schools, but then they were like the cost of living also played a big factor in my decision. Like going into New York City was too expensive. And so I was like, okay, with this stipend of a grad student, I think I can try and make ends meet while at Rochester. And so University of Rochester ticked all the boxes on my checklist.
And Cindy, looking over your LinkedIn profile. Was University of Rochester? Did you do undergrad in the States, or did you do? Was University of Rochester your first, I guess, introduction to coming to the United States and doing your graduate studies?
Actually, it wasn't. I
Okay.
did my undergrad in South Carolina at at an HBCU, and then I transitioned to the University of Rochester later on.
And what attracted you then to do your graduate studies up here?
I think it's a little bit of an interesting journey for me because grad school was really my plan B. I think from the time I was quite young, I knew two things. I love science and I want to help people. And I think at that time, for me, that equated into becoming a physician, because I think that's it's just a known thing, right? It's
Yeah.
a known profession, and I thought this is what I was going to do. And so throughout my undergrad, I was pre-med biotech, and I thought that's what I would end up doing. And I was applying to all of these medical schools, and either I would not get in, or I would get waitlisted, or I would get in, but I wouldn't get the scholarship. And I knew that I would need a scholarship to go forward. But so in the interim, I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to also apply to graduate schools and see. And I think when I got to the University of Rochester, it wasn't necessarily top of my list, right? Somebody had said, oh, they have a great program in translational biomedical sciences, and it could bridge that gap for you if you don't get into medical school, but, you know, you would still be in that sort of setting. But what really changed everything for me, I think, was when I came in and I interviewed with Dr. Beck Kim, who at that time was doing HIV pathogenesis. I think he's now in Atlanta. And he was, or he is, an incredible scientist, but just a wonderful human being. And so I think that interview, which maybe should have been 15, 20 minutes, lasted more than an hour. And he got me so excited about, you know, being at the bench side. And I had done some genomic work before when I was at the Cleveland Clinic. And I said, okay, you know what, this could be a natural progression. And I think he also convinced me that Rochester is the place to be, right? That there was good opportunities at the university, that there was a good enough or healthy enough international student population, so I wouldn't feel like, you know, as an outsider. And he said, you would be able to focus here. You know, I was considering schools in New York, and he said, oh, there's a lot of, you know, distractions out there. And so I think our conversation was really very substantive and also very inspiring. And it was really the reason that I decided to choose the University of Rochester. And I could not be happier with that choice.
And looking at so, you know, following your time at U of R, you know, looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you talked about this last week when you met with some U of R students in a separate event, is, you know, so many different experiences leading up to where you are now, very, you know, kind of non-linear career path. I mean, executive support to the Director General of the World Health Organization. I'm sure during your graduate studies, you were familiar with WHO and probably what they did, but did you ever kind of see, like, down the road,
No.
like, oh, that's what I see myself doing?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think even when I got in here, I never even thought about it. I mean, I do think that, you know, one of the tips that I would give to any graduate student or any student who is looking to begin building their career is to have a sense of openness. I think you have to understand that, you know, the roles that we might traditionally think that we want to get into, there's nothing wrong with that, but we need to be open to other experiences that could better be aligned to your skill set. Mm-hmm. And I think along the way, you know, if you have that openness and you have people who believe in you and see you, and you kind of go with that advice, you can end up in incredible places. And I think this is my story, right? I've moved from one position to the next because I think folks have come along and said, hey, I think you would be great at this. And as opposed to saying, well, no, that's not what I was going for, I was like, hey, why not? Let me try it and see. And I remember when the Director General, we had our first conversation about this position. Never thought about it, but he was like, you know, you are great at organizing, and to the extent that, you know, you're great with people, why not try this? And I'm really, really happy that I said yes to that.
Absolutely. Vivek, what about yourself? Any kind of lessons similar to that, or just along those same lines from your own job search in academia?
Yeah, so I would echo the same thoughts as Cindy. I mean, we come into grad school like with an open mind, learn new things, because I came to grad school with the mindset of doing only cancer research, and then I ended up doing my research, my PhD in cardiovascular disease, so completely different and more transcriptional biology. So it was completely different. So that's why I would say, like, just keep an open mind. Don't come in with a closed mind that, hey, this is what I'm going to do. It's great if you want to do that, but also keep on learning. Make grad school a learning path, so
Hmm.
a learning journey. So keep on picking up new things, and just add it to your toolbox. So eventually it will come down in the long run. And I would also say, like, just use support of your friends, colleagues, family. That's important because getting their backing is really important. And I would say don't burn bridges. I mean, don't ever burn bridges with anybody because it's all about this networking. That the word spreads very fast, and people connect you if you're good, and if you have if you've led if you've been friendly with them and if you've been helpful, they will help you back. So I think it all goes around, so it'll come back.
Yeah, Cindy, you talked a lot about that last week when speaking with some of our trainees. Just the fact, I think you said, any job you've ever gotten was very much connected to your network or was using your network. And that, I guess, kind of leads to my next question about just mentorship, and being international students. Can you talk about the role that just kind of mentorship and building that network played? Cindy, we'll start with you on that one.
Sure. I mean, for sure, I would not be anywhere if I didn't have folks who not just believed in me, but actively took a role in trying to help me get to the next step. And I think that's really important because there's mentorship and there's also sponsorship. And I think the two should somehow come together. So along the way, I remember in undergrad, I had one or two professors who anytime I would need to apply for an internship or something like that, I would go to them, get their advice. Sometimes they even put in a good word. And that's kind of been along the way from undergrad and graduate school. That role was played also by not just by my thesis advisor, but other folks who sat on my committee. And then subsequently, when I went into the corporate world, I was really, really privileged to find people who I established friendships with and who would say, hey, I'm in a more senior role or I have this experience. Let me give you this feedback, but also let me make an introduction for you. So I do think that each position that I've had has really been at the benefit of, folks making an effort to say, I want to help you and I want to help you based on the relationship that we have. Or I've heard about you from somebody that you do know very well, and I'm going to open this door for you. And I think that's really helpful. I think there is that give and take about, cultivating those relationships. And even within my own role, if I see somebody now who I could help, I should also help, because I know that that's the way that I think you move forward. And it's also the way that I think you become not just a better individual, but you become a better professional to continually have that mentorship presence in your life.
Mm-hmm. We've heard that theme before from some other alums we've had on the show, just of giving back because they received so much help from mentors along the way, and now feel that and get the pleasure from giving that back to folks that are in the position they were in not so long before. And Vivek, you hit on this answer a little bit ago, but can you speak to how the role mentorship played for you along the way? And I'm sure now in your position, being able to, how maybe it informed how you mentor trainees now.
Definitely. So I'm ever grateful to my mentors for, supporting me and being there. In fact, I even remember as a postdoc, I reached out to my mentors to write me a letter of support when I was applying for grants. And so having that kind of relationship with mentors and, members, not even mentors, but members of your thesis committee is important. And then going forward, you try and do the same. You try and give back to the community just this way that the community helped you. So I try and support my mentees or people in other lab by writing letters of support or having them come down to my lab, use equipment or train them, because it's always about giving back and preparing the next generation of scientists to come on board. because you can't do everything by yourself. So it's all teamwork, and teamwork will only happen when you are able to train other people, together.
Part of International Education Week is kind of celebrating unique perspectives that come from being an international student. Can we talk a little bit about just how being an international student did that, and having that unique perspectives and the strengths that come with that? How did that help in your professional and academic journeys? Vivek, we'll start with you.
Hmm. So I think, as a grad student, I think we were all in the same field, like we were all leveled up. So I don't think there was much of an advantage. So I think
Yeah.
in grad school we all are similar. I would say maybe, maybe a plus point could be like, maybe, hey, you know, um, you could probably interact a little more when you see a more diverse group.
Hmm.
So the interaction, it's easier to interact when you see a diverse group. So I think that would be a marginal positive, but at the end, I would say it was all equal. I would say.
Okay. Cindi, anything to add there?
Um, I mean, I think it's a perspective thing, because actually I find that international students, um, some people say you have sometimes more disadvantages because you might not have access to the same funding as American citizens and permanent residents, and certainly I had my own challenges in getting funding. But actually, I'd like to say that I think it was much more of a positive. I do think actually, as an international student, you could in fact be at an advantage. I think when you come from a place, particularly if you're coming from, I wouldn't even just say a low and middle income country, but I do think when you haven't had all those opportunities in your own country and you come to a place that's filled with opportunities, there's a certain amount of focus and excitement that you have, and you don't take it for granted. You're hungry for it. And so that hunger gives you the advantage because you become much more resourceful, because sometimes you don't have the resources that your other American colleagues might have. And not only that, I think you've had to adapt. You're not in your environment. So you're going to have to, you're already exhibiting a certain level of resilience. And so when you get into a graduate school program, you bring that resilience with you. I can tell you that doing a PhD, for when you finished it, okay, great, but there's actually a lot of people who don't finish, and they don't finish because for many reasons. It could be family, personal. Sometimes it's just a lack of discipline, a lack of interest. Sometimes it's your mentors are not necessarily the right ones for you. I mean, the reasons are a plethora, but I do often find that international students, they finish because they know what it took to get them there. They know the sacrifices of their parents, many of them, and they have that level of resilience, and that definitely puts you at an advantage. And so I cherish the fact that I came from another country. I love that I brought with me my values, and I had that inculcated in me. I had an identity which I adhere to even to this day, because you could get lost in a place like the United States. But all of those things allowed me to have a strong foundation to complete my PhD and to go on to do the things that I eventually did. So that's my perspective about, that advantage. I think it's definitely there.
And speaking of completing a PhD, we do have a question from Amal. Thank you for jumping on. Since you both have talked about networking to your committee members when choosing your thesis committee, what are some things that one should consider specifically in terms of career goals? Does anyone want to take that one?
I just need a second to think. Maybe Vivek, you want to go first?
All right. So I think, maybe you should have somebody who's probably along. I would keep it a diverse committee. So maybe somebody who's doing the same kind of research, like in the same field, like cardiovascular disease, and then maybe somebody who's not a cardiovascular biologist. So maybe somebody who's like a cancer biologist. Maybe they could give you their own perspective. So it's because you always want to hear different perspectives, because research is something where it's important to know what other people can bring on the table. So, an outside idea is sometimes the best idea. So I would say, having a diverse people from diverse disciplines on your thesis committee, that would be helpful.
And Cindy, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I fully agree with Vivek, because the more diversity you have, I think it's the more enriched your thesis is going to be. If I think about what's advantageous for your career, maybe a couple of things, and it's a bit practical, but I think it's good if your committee or folks on your committee are well funded, or they have thriving projects. I mean, because it means that there could be the opportunity to transition into their lab as a postdoctoral fellow or things like that. So I think understanding the pipeline of projects and funding for your committee members is important. I think the second thing is knowing a bit the network of your committee members, because the network of your committee members can de facto become your network if you have good relationships with your committee members, right? It means that when the time comes for you to go forward, they can connect you with some folks in the network. So that would be the second thing. I think the third thing to think about is, especially if you're going into sort of this PI pathway, or you're going down this research pathway, publications is very important. So I think look at sort of not just the breadth of the publications that your committee members have, but where are they publishing? Is it in high impact journals and things of that nature? Because if you're also trying to publish and kind of cement your footstep, which I absolutely recommend, publishing parts or all of your thesis, um, well published committee members can guide you, or better, they can co-author with you. So, I mean, for me, those would be three things that I think are fundamental things when you're looking for your committee members. And maybe soft thing, which you need to have chemistry with them, in the sense that have a good relationship, people who care about you, care about where you're trying to go, and will be willing to put the rubber to the road, right? Some people say very nice things and, oh, we support you, but are they willing to pick up the phone? Are they willing to write a letter of recommendation for you? So I think you've got to be able to tease out whether you have that chemistry and those kinds of folks who would absolutely believe in you and stand up and advocate for you.
Right. Yeah. And I would just like to also add something that, check where the mentees are from that lab, where have they gone? How long has it taken them to finish their thesis, and where are they right now? Are they in the postdoc? Are they industry? And how are they doing?
Love it. Thank you, Amal, for the question. I want to just talk a little bit about the job search process. And Cindy, I want to start with you. And I don't mean to steer your answer in a particular direction, but you did say something very interesting to the trainees last week about, I think someone was just talking about how just tough the job market is these days in various kind of industries or wherever. But you made a point to, say you don't always have to just consider the U.S. Consider, look internationally as well. But if obviously, I don't mean to steer your answer in the direction, but if you have any kind of other tips and want to expand on that a little bit when it comes to the job search, please.
Sure. I do think that people do limit themselves a little bit, and you shouldn't. There is a lot of different opportunities across the world. I think the way to, if I could think about when you're going through a job search, is you have to understand where those jobs would be present, meaning which platform. So I think LinkedIn is great. it's a great place to start. If you put in some parameters of these are the kinds of jobs I'm looking for, this is the industry I'm looking for, and they also ask you geographically where you want to be based. And if you put that there, it'll open up a whole doorway of things that you might not have even considered. And I think, that big floodgate allows you to start maybe giving you some ideas about, okay, I didn't realize that this particular job, there's a lot of opportunities, let's say in Norway, or, Norway, or you pick a country that they've, put out there for you and say, oh, I realize that in this country, they're also merging it with, its health and, let's say, technology, and I never considered that before. So I think use a search engine like LinkedIn to kind of give you that big pool, and then you can start whittling down your priorities from there and be open to it. I think certainly when I left graduate school, I stayed within the US. I think it was easier, and also for personal reasons with my family, it was easier to be there. But at the same time, I thought to myself, there must be more. And I am so glad that I took that step, and now working within a multilateral organization and having traveled in different countries and different places, I can see that those opportunities are very much there. And not everywhere has the same immigration thresholds and complexities as the United States.
Mhm.
So I think it's just something to consider. But my general advice is, go big with your search engines like LinkedIn. Some people use things like Indeed. Some people, if you're more senior in your career, you can use a headhunter. But as a graduate school student, I think if you're not using a search engine platform, definitely use your colleagues and your mentors to really give you some directions. That's where you can head. But definitely the world it's big, it's fabulous, and it's waiting for many students to come.
Yeah, and Vivek, can you speak a little bit on the job search, maybe specific to those that might be interested in going the academia or the research route?
Sure, yeah. So I would say start off with, making a search engine, look up the search engine, make a search list, a job list, that what all criteria you want, and, go ahead and use LinkedIn, Indeed, use all of these resources, and don't, and I know with the being an international student, there's always the problem about the visa if you want to stay in the United States. But don't be afraid of applying, go ahead and apply. And towards the end of the interview, when they ask you, do you have any questions for us, at that time you can say, hey, I'm on a visa, and do you guys sponsor visa? And most likely in academia, they do say yes, or if not, they say, we'll get back to you. But if they really like you, they'll make it happen. So, and even if it turns out that they don't sponsor visas, don't worry, it'll just be a good practice interview. So take it as you're just practicing with an interview with somebody in the HR or somebody in the scientific team, and it's always a good practice. So that's why I would say, don't hold back, just apply, just apply. I remember when I was in grad school, I sent out like maybe I went towards the end of grad school, I sent out like maybe 60 applications, and I heard from just maybe 10. So, so just apply big.
And Vivek, you also mentioned one other thing when we spoke a few weeks ago ahead of the conversation, and the importance of remembering to save your work. Can you
Oh, yeah.
elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's actually funny. So my graduate thesis was on a project. So as a grad student, I was working on a gene called Limodin 1, and I spent nights in the lab, and days, nights, and I said towards after I was done with it, I was like, I submitted my thesis. I'm like, I'm never going to study this gene again. I went to my postdoc. I transitioned to another gene, completely different. And then a few years later, it came back to haunt me because it was the target gene of a GWAS study, like a genome-wide association study. So this is where they genotype like 200,000 people, and this gene was the leading gene associated with cardiovascular disease.
Mm.
So now I had to go back to my grad school notes, dig up my thesis, and see what all I use and what reagents I use. So I would say, and that actually is the foundation of my independent research career as well. So that same gene. So just keep your notes handy. Keep it keep it somewhere safe, and never close those.
No, don't put them in the shredder, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. If can I just add,
yeah,
two things on that? I do think it's just a great lesson in everything comes back,
Yeah.
and people come back, work comes back, and I do think that along the way, even if it's not like a literal, research project, the skills that you use in one area
Mhm.
will definitely help you elsewhere. And I love that. I feel like that definitely in my career, the things which I learned during my graduate school experience and that interdisciplinary nature of it, that certainly came full circle when I came into this multilateral world. So, love that you said that. And maybe one other thing I'll piggyback off of is that um, I was saying, I think when I was talking to students last week, that I really strongly believe in networking, and you have to be resilient about it, and you just put yourself out there. So I was thinking about what Vivek said, that he put out this 60 applications, and there was an example I gave that when I wanted to move from Rochester to New York City, I think I spoke to like 30 people. It started off with like two, but it's a snowball effect. One person told me talk to this one, then this one, and I did that, and across those 30 conversations, that led to different job offers in New York City. But it didn't happen overnight, right? And I think maybe two or three of those conversations actually led to something. So, which is the same like when you're applying, so you've got to keep that level of resilience. I think you have to put yourself out there if you'd like to get something that's worthy of your career. So just don't give up, keep open, and cast the net wide.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I would say maybe to all grad students, just get those visiting cards printed for yourselves. It's gonna
Yeah.
be maybe like $50, $60, but get it. It's worth it. When you go to meetings, just hand your visiting cards to people you meet, and take theirs as well. And yeah, and maybe design it in a way that you can write your expertise and when you're graduating and what you're looking for.
I'll get final thoughts here in a minute, even though that was a great way to wrap it up, I think. I do just want to mention, because Eric put it in the comments, um, current trainees, Eric is there to help you develop your LinkedIn profile and develop strategies and techniques to network. Can also help with the job search strategy. You can schedule one-on-one appointments with him, and that you can do that by going to myhub.urmc.edu. And Eric also put the link in the chat there. It's a wonderful free resource for our graduate trainees. So that's all I had. I do just want to give both of you an opportunity to add your final thoughts. And on top of that, one of the best things about living where you currently are. Why don't we start with Vivek?
Well, I've been crisscrossing the entire country. I did my postdoc in California and now back in Alabama. So I've been all around the country, and it's been good. I mean, you just get to, in academia, you get to like go for meetings and all. So you get the opportunity to soak in like the different parts, the different ways people work, the different perspectives of people. So Alabama is very different than California and New York, so it's very laid back, and it's a lot of greenery here. So there are a lot of trails. So I mean, that's one thing I like about Alabama. A lot of hiking trails. So on the weekend, if I'm not in the lab, I'm usually out going on the hike, going on a trail, going on the
Okay.
trails.
All right. And Cindy,
Well,
final thoughts? Go
I,
ahead.
I love that Vivek said the greenness, because living in the land of green over here.
Yeah.
Um, Switzerland's a wonderful place for hikes and all of those things. And I think it's a great point to say that your life is not only in the lab or in the, at the desk or wherever it is. It's best to really think about how you can be an all-rounded individual. Those times when you're outside and spending time also with your family is what enriches you and makes you to be the person that you can I think, be the best at your job. I think one thing that probably I would say is my greatest lesson and greatest advice is simply to be kind. Kindness goes a very long way. And you don't be kind just for the sake of getting something back. I think it is our responsibility as human beings to be there for people in a way that we can be, in however small ways we can. And miraculously, it's the thing that I think has allowed me to be where I am today. I wouldn't say it's a product of all of my hard work and anything else. I just think I'm at the mercy of a lot of different people's kindness upon my life. And I think that that's also, I think, who you should be as a person. So that's what I would put that out into everything that you're doing. Just don't forget to be kind.
All right. Well, I love it. I think that's a great place to end. Getting outside, exploring, and be kind. Great tips to end on. Thank you both so much for giving us your time today and speaking with us on the next step. Really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so
you.
much, Jeff. Great to meet you, Vivek.
Yep, great to meet you too, Cindy.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the Next Step podcast. If you liked what you heard, please share with other members of the University of Rochester community or anyone you think could benefit from these career stories. And we wish you nothing but the best in your own career journey. Until next time.